And so what I want to do today, again, 15 minutes to go through this landscape is a tall order, but it's also a fun one. And it's a fun one for me because when I think about the fact that each of us every day spends a large percentage of our time thinking about our daily job and what we're doing, and the career trajectory we want to be on, whether we're in school first thinking about it, or 20 or 30 years into our careers saying, what do we do next? It's what enables us to have families and lives outside and economic opportunity. And there's this fundamental shift taking place. And so what I'm going to do is try to at least lay the groundwork for how I think about that, how LinkedIn has put some frameworks in place, at least what we aspire to do, and give some examples that will hopefully carry through to the conversation we have the rest of the evening. So what you're looking at here behind me is actually I should do a quick check. I should first say, how many of you here today are in LinkedIn? Can I see a show of hands? So the fun thing about this question now is it's pretty much I'm looking at about 95% of the folks. Right? And then the question is, have you discovered your in-map yet? So let me take a moment here for those of you who haven't. This is a visualization of my professional network. Every single dot on that screen is somebody that I know, that I have built a relationship with, who somehow fits into my professional sphere. And the reason I say that, and I want to call it out, so for example, if you look in the upper right, that blue cluster, that happens to be all my colleagues who work at LinkedIn. Right? No one would know that but me. It's not the algorithm saying make blue their current employer and make reds. I mean, it's a clustering algorithm, and everyone forms these differently. But the reason I call it out, and I start most of my talks this way, is because we often start talking about big numbers and the social networks. This is all about the individual out. And everybody has some form of a professional network, whether they're building it, whether they've built it for years, or whether they're starting to work with it in different ways. And to make that point, what I'd love to do is just take a moment here, and what I'm showing you are a bunch of visualizations of very different people's networks. Again, it says member, because I just took instances where it created the pretty graph. But notice, what's interesting about these is they're all different. Perhaps some of the clustering is about the areas of expertise you have, where for some people we see it's your current employer and your former employer. For some people, you can see that a cluster becomes their alumni network that they have cultivated over their educational years. Right? And what's interesting is that over and over you start looking at these visualizations and you realize these folks are doing a vast number of different things, and to each one of them, their professional network matters. And that's what we're trying to think about, is how can this platform enable all kinds of ways that you build these networks and utilize them. Right? And so what's interesting here is as I'm talking through some of these examples and then we get into the discussion later, think about how it applies back to you, because it is a personal experience and it's a personal set of opportunities. It's not a macro level trend that you just read about in the paper and say, wow, that number went up today. So what we can do first, if I can walk you through a couple examples of kind of the construct that LinkedIn thinks about, I want to make sure that I've set the stage properly. And it's because I find oftentimes when we're talking about the social networks, people say the social networks, right? Like it's one phenomenon, and in a way it is, right? What's happened is that we've now said Web 1.0, people could come through technology, they could do typically one-person-to-one-person interactions, or they could find a piece of information. But it was technology coming together with people. Now it's groups of people, it's dynamic interactions, it's collaboration. This wave of bringing social and technology together on a platform is what we're talking about when we say the world has changed in terms of the opportunities and the platforms to do your job, to do your career explorations, and to cultivate your networks. So let me make a set of distinctions. If all you do is leave talking about social networking with this construct in mind, I think it helps the dialogue. And that construct is the idea that there are different types of social networks. When you hear people say the social networks, LinkedIn, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, YouTube, Ning, Zynga, and they keep going, it's like saying throw in the kitchen sink while you're at it. That is marveling at a phenomenon, and you should marvel at the phenomenon. But if you want to be a savvy business person saying, how am I going to take advantage of it, how am I going to jump in for the first time, or how am I going to continue to develop my expertise, I'd argue there's three variables you must consider. The first is, what type of identity is being represented? Are you anonymous? Are you creating kind of a new persona around your actual identity, kind of role-playing? Or are you actually representing yourself as who you are? The second is the nature of the relationships inside these social networks. And that's what is also important when you think about the dynamic interplay of people and human ecosystems. What I mean here is, are they your friends? Are they your colleagues? Are they your peers when you're in school? Right? There's all kinds of relationships. Are they your family? All different ways that you might start to say human interactions can come on the platform. And the third is, what kind of activities are these systems tuned for? In LinkedIn's case, professional networks, but there's all kinds of activities, gameplay, et cetera, and you're inserting yourself into those systems. Right? terms of the big three, I won't go on in any great detail because I assume people are very familiar with these. But if I were just to give a shorthand of how I think about the value proposition, and I think all three have their place in a conversation around what do you do as a professional in today's connected world. Obviously, Facebook will say themselves, we are the social utility. And you can see the numbers, we've all heard the stories. In terms of Twitter, it's, I think, a very good shorthand to say the public broadcast system. And if you think about what that means, some people can use it as a megaphone to broadcast messages, to be heard by whoever wants to listen. Other people in their business and professional lives, for example, can use it to listen in on what is the dialogue of the day and how does that impact me as an individual, how does it impact my business that I'm representing and trying to make smart decisions around. And then, of course, there's LinkedIn. And remember when I said that the type of identity, relationships, and activities matter? In the case of LinkedIn, we are creating the professional context. We are trying to say that is the bounds in which we want to take advantage of all these opportunities and bring those to our members. So if you haven't seen it before, it's very simple, but it's very powerful. LinkedIn's mission. LinkedIn's mission is to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful in what they do. What does it mean to connect the world's professionals? Today, LinkedIn has over 100 million self-registered members around the globe. But just over half of those members are outside the United States. This is a global phenomenon. And when you start to think about networks and when you hop from your first degree, the people you know, to the second degree, who they know, and then who they know, you start to realize that you might be a couple hops away from anybody in the world. That is amazingly powerful when you think about what does that empower you to do as a professional. The second half of our equation, the make you more productive and successful in what you do, we hope and believe we are enabling members through certain value propositions that we think about every day. And I'm going to break them down into three categories and try to give you just really quick, simple examples from the pages, products, and services you already are familiar with on LinkedIn. So in the context of identity, I think it often gets overlooked that just this idea that you can now establish your profile and you can represent it in new and thoughtful ways and it can be discovered around the world is in itself a value proposition. Remember back to some point, say you're midway through your career, you gave a talk and you gave it at some local community event and the reporter misquoted you or put your wrong title there. And that's what floated around the web and you couldn't correct it no matter what you did. Today, if you actually go and you start to say, I can own it and it's there, that's a value proposition. But even more than that, it's no longer just saying I've digitized my resume. Your profile is about your reputation. You can express your skills, not just your criteria for what job you're looking for, not just the title of the job you have. I can infer a lot about a person by looking at who they're connected to. Even how you're situated in a network relative to me, who we know in common tells me a lot about you. So to bring the point home in terms of the profile, let me just give a concrete example. If you go and you Google my name today, the #1 search result, if you just put Ellen Levy, is my LinkedIn public profile. Think of the power of that. That is something LinkedIn tries to make sure we deliver all the time. We want people to find your message. That's why it becomes so important as we talk later through this conversation this evening to manage your message. The next piece, when I talk about the insights value proposition we think about and we create products and services around, it's the idea that information can flow through these networks in phenomenally interesting ways. So all of you have seen your homepage. And maybe you didn't think this is my insight page, but these are embedded in the way we design our systems and the way we think about empowering our members. So for example, on your home page, there's information from your network that you can see that just organically comes through the system once you've established who you're connected to and who you are interested in. There's also ways to build your network. So for example, you probably have all noticed there's the people you may know category. It might remind you of somebody that you knew from your school days that you never thought to connect with, and they're in an interesting job relevant to you, right? So there's all these nice implicit ways of getting information through the system, and there's ways to interact with your network. And I'm going to take one example of interacting with your network because personally I'm passionate about this piece of professional networking. The simple act of seeing on your homepage that somebody has gotten a new job. That is something to celebrate, especially in these times, but anytime somebody's in a career change that moves them to the next step. I see that in my status updates, my network updates, and I take the moment to click on the button saying send them a note, congratulate them. I might not have in the old world even learned that they had changed jobs for 6 months or a year. And here I can reinforce that I'm saying to them, good job, I'm paying attention, and I learn from it. And then the third example for insights is LinkedIn Today. Now this one's interesting to me because this is one of those where the system starts giving back. When you build your network and you start thinking about who are the people that are relevant to you and you connect to them, maybe they're the people you share a professional association with, or maybe it's a coworker who sits in the cubicle next to you, or maybe it's your classmate in a virtual context, but you found you have the same questions and you think about the problems the same way and you've bonded. Right? What's interesting about LinkedIn today, if you haven't seen it, is think of it as kind of a digital newsletter that gets put up for you by LinkedIn. But that newsletter is generated by insights we have about who you have said you're connected to. Who are people like you? Are they in the same kind of roles? Do they work in the same industry? We have algorithms that start to say, let us give back to you all kinds of information that could be uniquely interesting. And in this case, it's surfaced by information we have about what may be interesting to you that could inform you in your job or in your interests. Right? And there's ways to contribute. If you like to share back and give information, you now know that's also helping everyone else in your network. And then the third category, again, is groups. And what's interesting about groups to me is this is like saying, I took a universe of 100 million connected people, this undifferentiated mass, which in itself is interesting, and I've made it tailored to my interests and needs. Right? So all of a sudden now, I can be in a 2-person group, a 20-person group, or a 5,000-person group. Right? Today in the DeVry alumni group, we have people coming together with a shared interest, a shared experience, and hopefully shared futures, because now there's a professional bond that doesn't change, it's what you do with it. The groups help you curate context so that you can have the proper discussions, discover people who have interests like yours, who are perhaps thinking about the same set of career problems that you have. But these are tools. Groups are what you make of them. Again, this is a participatory sport here. And so when you think about all these products, it becomes interesting not to say what's the feature and what color and what font did they put on the page, but what is this starting to surface for me as I'm starting to tap my network? Right? So in closing, I just want to set this as hopefully a launching point to a whole set of conversations and questions we're going to have in the next hour or so. And this is, if I wanted to say, let's take the entire universe of talking about your professional network, I like this construct. These 3 categories I'm just about to walk through will set the frame for the ways you can think about it and the way people talk about it and they give advice. One is this general category of building your network. Right? Building, managing, curating, etc. And what's interesting there is that can be everything from saying, I'm just getting started on LinkedIn and I'm going to bring it into this new platform where I get these kind of value propositions and new ways of working, to going to the cocktail party after work with a bunch of peers and building new relationships. It runs the gamut. Virtual events, physical events, conferences, everything we do to start making sure that we expose ourselves to things that matter. The second category is one that seems very obvious and it always comes up, which is what can you get from your network? When I'm between jobs, my network is amazing. It's the time that everybody steps up and says, let me help you, right? I know somebody at that company, let me make an introduction if that's where I hope to work. Receiving is not a hard concept, but I want to make sure that that third piece always stays in our conversation, and that's the giving part. These are relationships, not transactions. Right? I can do a transaction, walk away, nothing happens. Right? It's done. We've cleared the business. We may not see each other. Relationships are what these networks are about, and it's a give and take. And I think that's the third piece when you think about how do you take advantage of these. That's equally important because you receive more, I think, when you give more. So I'm going to stop there, hopefully having put at least a couple ideas or hooks out there that we can discuss as we go through the rest of the evening. So thank you.